No, when I came out of the womb, I knew I wanted to be a doctor. I'm someone who's been considered for a long time, a top shelf person in medicine, if not the top medical doctor. No, as I moved into the first set of historic U.S. Senate hearings, I was the lead witness. November 19, 2020, the whole hospital took half a day off. People cheered. The CEO sent me congratulatory emails. It was like, I was going to save America. They were overweight and they become incredibly buff and they're jogging on the beach.
Yeah.
And one year I ran 15 marathons in a year. Brock, and I hate to bring it up, but you look like you could be kind of a wild guy, and that's alcohol. Having my entire career dismantled because I treated patients. I published the first protocol in a very high-level journal, American Journal of Medicine. I showed that it worked, and I led America out of this crisis. And then 3 months later, vaccines came out. I got called into a room and said, listen, you're fired. You're gone.
This is back to your story.
All right. Thank you so much. Seriously. I said this before, but I do appreciate you coming on the podcast to share your story. It means a lot to have you on the show. Like I said before, I always like to start every single podcast with the guests introducing themselves, because I do come from the school of thought that you do know yourself best. And I'd like for you to just kind of do a brief introduction.
Sure, I'm delighted. I'm so happy to be here on the show. I'm Dr. Peter McCullough. I'm an internal medicine physician, cardiologist, Dallas, Texas. And I'm in a blend of academic practice where I spend time seeing patients, internal medicine, non-invasive cardiology, and the rest is in scholarship and research. And I've done that largely my entire career. I've focused on heart and kidney disease as a particular interface, but now in the last 3.5 years, I've been singularly focused on SARS-CoV-2, COVID-19 infection, and now complications after the vaccine.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, those are a lot of things right there. For you starting, at the origins of your story, right? Because this is back to your story. Had you always wanted to be a doctor? Was this something that since a little boy? Is it from the family? How did this all start?
I'm the first doctor in my first doctor from my genetic line of family members. My Uncle Al married my Aunt Carol. He's a cardiologist. But no, when I came out of the womb, I knew I wanted to be a doctor. It's like there was nothing else, and I had a singular pursuit. Sometimes if you just know from the very beginning, it makes it pretty easy.
Yes, yes, yes. Which is very rare, because it takes most people, most kids especially, many years to figure out what they want to do. So to understand what you want to do and become at a young age, that means a lot to your test of character and who you are as a person. Was it always cardiology, or was there a different avenue when you were younger?
I was broader initially. I liked the full breadth of medicine. I did very well in surgery. I strongly considered surgery, but I love the breadth and depth of medicine. The vast majority of research in medicine is done in internal medicine. It's not, the surgical specialties don't do much research. Primary care doesn't. It's really medicine and the medicine specialties like cardiology, oncology, gastroenterology, immunology, infectious diseases, etc. So I like the breadth. I trained at the University of Texas Southwestern in Dallas, finished top of my class. And here's something your listeners may want to know if you ever want to see if they've got a top doctor. There is a very prestigious society called Alpha Omega Alpha, AOA. So AOA is chapters are only at the top 50% of all medical schools in the United States, and it's only the top 10% of the graduates make AOA. So if you get a doctor who says, well, he's an AOA graduate of Southwestern or Harvard, or you're getting a top shelf doctor. And so after that, I went off to the University of Washington in Seattle, at the time the '1 medicine residency training in the United States, just ahead of the Harvard programs. I interviewed there as well. And when I finished medicine back in the '80s, it was very common to do service. People took a break for a while before they went on for more training. And so I did service. I signed up for a rural medicine position in the northern part of the lower peninsula of Michigan. And I signed a 3-year contract. I served it out. The last year of it, I worked, part-time, and I went to the graduate school at the University of Michigan Public Health and trained in epidemiology. But so I started out very broad, and I discovered through my time in internal medicine that a large amount of internal medicine dealt with cardiovascular disease. The risk
Yeah.
factors for cardiovascular disease, like high cholesterol, diabetes, high blood pressure, smoking, family history, obesity, a lot of these inputs led to cardiovascular disease. And among causes of death in the United States, heart disease is about 40% of all the causes of death. So at that time, getting through that rural health experience, I was relieved of my student loans. With that, we graduated from University of Michigan School of Public Health and Epidemiology. Computers were just coming in at that time. I then undertook my cardiology fellowship at what's now the Oakland University William Beaumont School of Medicine, and 3 years there, trained under a dynamic leader in interventional cardiology, William O'Neill. And then I was fully baked. I knew I wanted to always do a blend of clinical practice and research.
Wow, that's absolutely incredible. Thank you for summarizing your entire life story in a little blip. I do appreciate that. It makes my job a lot easier. In America, you said 40%, right? What is it? Is it, I mean, I already know the answer, but I'd actually like to understand from your perspective, why is it so high in America? And I'm sure there's other, nations as high, if not higher.
It's true. All the developed nations are about the same. So look at causes of death. It's 40% heart disease, 40% cancer, and then 20% other causes, like drug overdose, suicide, car accident, other causes. It's always 40, 40, 20. And
Yeah.
it's just how things work out in the United States. Now, well, you're pointing out this interest of preventable fraction, which is interesting. So if you look at 40% of deaths due to cancer, there's not much we can do about it, right? A woman gets a mammogram, a pelvic exam, just tries to stay on top of it, but there's not much you can do. Men and women both get screening colonoscopies for colon cancer. What can a guy do? A guy can pretty much get a blood prostate PSA test, a digital rectal exam, and a colonoscope. So the point is, cancer doesn't have a large preventable fraction. I mean,
Yeah.
it's true. If we don't smoke, don't drink alcohol, we minimize our cancer risks a little bit. Heart disease, on the other hand, huge preventable fraction, huge.
Yes.
So it's been said if we perfectly manage cholesterol, take medicines to lower cholesterol, don't gain weight, don't get diabetes, keep our blood pressure down, have a good diet, fitness, about 90% of the heart disease risk is eliminated.
Wow.
So heart disease is very preventable. Cancer and other causes, not so much.
Yeah, definitely. What about environmental reasons with everything due to pollutants and what we're putting in the air, the sky, or the air, in the soil, things of that nature?
Good question. Hard to calculate. Hard to calculate. I don't really have a handle on that. What would be preventable? There certainly are studies showing, pollution is no good for us. And as we get exposed to pollutants, we take on oxidative stress and other potential carcinogens. But it's not well quantified. People are greatly concerned that something has happened with the food supply. Do you know Americans have just skyrocketed in terms of obesity? Our appearance has changed. All different changes in the diet. Calories are going up. About 60% of the U.S. diet is in starch. Starch are sugar molecules linked together. Really, easy to understand starch is anything made out of flour.
Yeah.
And then potatoes and rice. That's starch. That's about 60% of the U.S. diet.
Wow.
And so
Wow.
the starch fraction has gone up. That's a factor. But there are also hormones used in the meat supply, in chicken, beef, pork, and the hormones may be playing a role as well. We've gone, from a relatively protein-starved society through the 1500s, 1600s, 1700s, 1800s. Now it's just finally had an availability of protein. It's an interesting observation. I've been to China 5 times. The average Chinese adult right now, young adult, let's say in their 20s or 30s, they're 9 inches taller than their parents.
What is the reasoning behind that?
Probably because the parents were protein starved as children. And so it stunted their growth. There can't be an evolutionary change or a genetic drift or other change that can account for 9 inches in a single generation.
No, definitely not. That's way too fast. Way too
Yeah.
fast. Um, what about sugars? I hear all of these things from all these different doctors and scientists, and it's just really hard to pinpoint like what is fact and fiction.
It's true. Isn't it true with almost everything in diet? You'll read something, oh, sugar's good for you. Sugar's bad for you.
Yes, yes,
Chocolate's good for you. Chocolate's bad for you. I
yes.
mean,
It's just so true.
people go nuts with, with dietary research. Well, it turns out, let's just take sugar. The main source of sugar is sugar cane and then sugar beets. It turns out that in nature, pure sugar is pretty rare. I mean, you'd have to really take a lot of sugar beets and concentrate it, or a lot of sugar cane and concentrate it. So animals don't naturally come in contact with a lot of sugar, but let me tell you this much. Animals are super addicted to sugar.
I am sure.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, if you take some sugar water and you put it out on a deer stand, oh my gosh, the deer can't stop licking it. They'll be around it. You put sugar water in a bottle in a cage and the rat will just go nuts. So sugar is super addictive, and we're really not supposed to have it.
Oh
So
my gosh.
it would be pretty rare that we'd encounter it. So that's the problem with sugar. It's really kind of a straight line addictive substances. Now starch is just a lot of sugar molecules linked together, but
Oh
sugar
wow.
and starch together are directly related to diabetes. Directly related. It's a straight line relationship. The more pounds of sugar and starch you eat, the greater your chance of diabetes.
Yeah. It's absolutely incredible. I've seen those videos before about the sugar and the water and different types of animals and how crazy they go. And we are just consuming them at a very, very rapid rate. Um,
Oh,
I've heard a
let
lot.
me say
Yeah,
one more thing,
go for it.
Brock, about sugar. Let me say one more thing about sugar. People say, well, can you have a little bit of sugar and enjoy it? Well, sure you can. But let me give you a handy rule of thumb. It takes about 20 grams of sugar to stimulate the pancreas to secrete insulin. Now, insulin is a very powerful hormone, and it takes all available glucose and free fatty acids and stuffs it inside fat cells. So insulin makes us fatter.
Yeah.
Okay. 20 grams of glucose. Well, how much is that? That's about 4 teaspoons of sugar. So you'd want to, if you like a little sugar, let's say you have a cup of coffee and you have a teaspoon in it, you're fine. It's not a big deal.
Yeah.
But what about this, Brock? How about a regular can of Coke? Any idea of how much glucose or sugars in a regular can of Coke? Do you even want to know?
Way too much for me to drink, and that's why I don't drink it. But how
Yeah,
much?
it's over 30.
That's
It's either
insane.
32 or 38. Yeah, it's about, it's probably about 8 teaspoons of sugar. It's too much. Have you ever watched it when you were a kid and your mom made Kool-Aid? Remember
Yeah,
that?
of course, of course.
Do you know how much sugar she put in to make that Kool-Aid?
Too much.
A massive amount. Have you ever been back in the 60s or 70s or 80s and your parents got an ice cream maker and you
Yes, I
make your
remember.
own ice cream? You pour gobs of sugar in there. That should tell anybody that's not right.
Yeah, it's definitely not right. And that's why I try to personally cut it out of my diet as much as possible. What about cholesterol? There's been so many different things. I remember the commercials from back in the day about lower your cholesterol with Cheerios and all of these different types of things. And then I've read other studies where, back in the 50s and 60s, the sugar companies would team up with scientists, and you know those studies. So, what is the real truth about cholesterol?
Okay, let's talk about cholesterol. Cholesterol is something necessary for all cells to have for cell wall integrity, other subcellular organelles. And we have relatively little cholesterol in our diet. The average human diet has, let's say, 200 milligrams or 300 milligrams of cholesterol in our diet. And most foods don't have it in it. And so the body handles about 1.2 grams of cholesterol just with its daily recirculation. So most of our cholesterol is coming through recirculation of bile. So the vast majority of cholesterol in the body makes in the liver, and it recirculates in the bile. The single greatest stimulus for our body to produce cholesterol is saturated fat. Now, saturated fat is kind of the gooey fat. That would be in red meats, chicken, bacon. You get a lot of saturated fat with burgers and fries, pizza, gooey cheesecake. That would be saturated fat, largely animal fat. Let me give you an example. The American Heart Association says that, if we have heart disease, we'd want to keep the saturated fat down to less than 10 grams a day as just a general ballpark. Do you know how many grams of saturated fat is in a Whataburger and fries here in Texas?
No, please tell me.
60. 6 times the daily amount. Or how about a Cheesecake Factory slice of cheesecake? Have you ever seen how big those are?
Of course. How much?
Yeah, it could be as high as 100 grams of saturated fat. Wow. So you'd want to keep it less than 10 grams. So let's say you have some coffee and you have some half and half in it. That's about 1 or 2 grams. But if you go out to Morton's Steakhouse and you have a 6-ounce filet, about 20 grams of saturated fat. This gives you a general idea. But you want to keep it less than 10 grams of fat. So the reason why saturated fat is related to heart disease is saturated fat stimulates the production of cholesterol. Cholesterol is overproduced, and then it starts to block the arteries to the heart. That's the most common form of heart disease. And it is related to cholesterol at the beginning, no doubt about it. Where the controversy comes in is with lowering cholesterol. So if the diet is high in saturated fat, you eat burgers and fries 3 times a week, let me tell you what, the cholesterol could be high, and just cutting out the saturated fats, it could go quite low. So it would be ideal if everybody had an LDL cholesterol, which is the more dangerous form of cholesterol. It'd be ideal if everyone was below 70. A lot of people are 100, 110, 130, and it's just not going to change much with diet. But, I've had patients with an LDL cholesterol of 180, but they're eating chicken McNuggets and fries with their little kids frequently and drinking regular milk and, on and on and on. And they finally cut out the saturated fat. It drops from 180 to 90. So LDL cholesterol can drop a lot if saturated fat is high. The LDL concentration is directly related to coronary heart disease. Directly. So somebody walking around with the LDL cholesterol of 190, their rate of heart attacks is this. 160, it's here. 130, it's here. 70, it's here. As you get lower and lower. So we have a clear-cut scientific situation with now approaching 100 high-quality, large, prospective, randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled trials that lowering cholesterol, no matter how you do it, with diet or drug A or drug B or drug C, lowering cholesterol always reduces risks of heart disease. Always. Always. And that means lower rates of heart attack, stroke, and cardiovascular death. Now, the most potent way to do it is with a class of drugs called statins. Statins are natural products. You can get a statin, lovastatin, in red rice yeast, and now they're available as generic medicines. They used to be expensive. A lot of companies made a lot of money on statins, but not anymore. I think the best-in-class statin is rosuvastatin, formerly known as Crestor. It's about $3 a month now. That's the one I personally take. Then there's another handy medicine called ezetimibe. Ezetimibe blocks a recirculation receptor in the intestines and allows the body to let some cholesterol go downstream. So I think rosuvastatin and ezetimibe is kind of the best-in-class combination to lower cholesterol. And it clearly could take a cholesterol of 160 and make it 80, for sure. And it's my go-to combination if people already have blockages. Now, if people already have blockages, we got to get going, because if those blockages get worse, they're going to clog off and they're going to need a bypass surgery or angioplasty or stenting. Where the controversy comes in is, let's say we have a perfectly healthy person like you, Brock. You don't have any blockages, and your doctor says, well, you should take a statin. It's hard, because if you don't have any blockages, what's the statin going to do for you, right? Because so that's the dilemma. And several years ago, the guidelines really clarified for this. It's very useful, something everybody should know. There's an easy heart scan called a coronary CT scan, a coronary calcium score. And with this, you go through a rapid CT. You don't even take off your clothes, no IV. And it can scan to see if cholesterol is building up in your arteries. They literally hand you the result when you get off the scanner. I wrote the guidelines for a major medical center here in Dallas several years ago. And I said, listen, if you're between the ages of 45 and 75, you have at least one additional risk factor like diabetes or a family history or smoking, get a coronary artery calcium scan. Now, if the score is 0, then the guidelines say, listen, we can wait 5 years and reevaluate. There's no urgency. There's no buildup. But if the score is 1, 2, 3, 7, 10, 25, and there's already starting to build up, we need to start the drugs, the statin and ezetimibe. I think that has helped a lot. Clearly, anybody who has blockages in the neck or the heart, they've already had a stroke or heart attack, for sure they need to be on these drugs. Now, people will say, wait a minute, statins aren't safe. I've heard bad things about statins. Well, statins in about 15% of people cause muscle aches. I just got to tell you, that's what it is. But 100% of people think they have muscle aches every day, whether they take a statin or not. So everybody has to be honest with themselves in terms of how much muscle aches and stiffness they have before they start making a big deal about statins. But I have patients every day in the office fight me. Say, Dr. McCullough, I don't want to take a statin. I don't want to take a statin. I said, well, you can skip taking a statin. You just can't complain when you need heart bypass surgery or angioplasty and stenting. You can't have your cake and eat it too.
Yeah, definitely. Once a person has blockage, is there anything that they can do without taking a statin? And part two of the question is, once they start taking the statins and the blockage it's cleared, can they get off it?
Well, statins don't clear the blockage. They just stabilize them.
Okay.
They just stabilize them. Now, maybe over many, many years, there can be some regression, but they just stabilize them. Now, if patients lose weight, go on a very low-fat diet, quit smoking, transform their life, maybe one person out of 100 could get into a position where they truly don't need a statin. I've had 1 or 2 patients in my practice. If I have thousands of patients, it'd be 1 or 2 that transform their life. I mean, they were overweight and they become incredibly buff and they're jogging on the beach. But so many people come in and they have pot bellies. They've already had a heart bypass surgery and they say, Dr. McCullough, I want to go natural. I don't want to take a statin. I was like, oh boy, this is going to be a tough one. Now, we've got an alternative. If people really don't want to take a statin or they can't tolerate it, and do you know what it is? It's an injectable drug.
Okay. What does that do?
Yeah. So you take an injection every 2 weeks or a month. They're called PCSK9 inhibitors. Proprotein convertase subtilisin kexin 9. Boy, that's a mouthful.
That is a lot.
The brand names are Praluent and Repatha. So people can take shots. If they say, listen, I've had heart bypass, I've had angioplasty, I don't like to take statins, I don't want to hear about taking a statin, we'll say, okay, you can go on an injection once every 2 weeks or once a month. Yeah. But I can tell you, a $3 statin, I'll take one tonight. It's a pretty minimal thing. Statins, I've run marathons on them, and it's just not a big deal. So I think people overplay safety concerns on statins, and they just don't realize the benefits that they can get.
Yeah, definitely. From all of your research and studies, what would you say? I mean, everyone's different, but a generic, very, very healthy lifestyle. What should people eat to make sure that their heart is functioning and their body is functioning at peak fitness? or at least close to it or somewhere near it.
You know, every doctor and every father and mother and everybody out there should have some brief dietary advice, some understanding of diet. In general, the goals of diet for most people are to lose some weight, prevent diabetes, and then prevent heart disease, coronary heart disease. Those are the three goals.
Yeah.
So if we flip it around and we ask the question, what does the body really need? The body really needs high quality sources of protein, and the polypeptides in fish are the same polypeptides in a steak. The difference is the package. The fish is packaged in healthy unsaturated fat. The steak is packaged in unhealthy saturated animal fat. So protein is all about the package. So the highest quality sources of protein are fish, beans, nuts, egg whites, non-fat dairy, and then occasional lean meats. It means occasional chicken or occasional beef or occasional pork. Occasional. And then the body needs fresh fruits and vegetables, largely for fiber, so the bowels will move, and for sources of vitamin. What the human body doesn't need that makes us fat, causes diabetes, or causes heart disease are the three S's. This is really important, three S's. Sugars, we've already covered it. You don't need it. Cut it out. Don't need those calories, and you simply don't need the sugar. Starches, that's the big one. We don't need baked goods. We don't need flour. We don't need bread, bagels, chips, muffins, cookies, brownies. We don't need them. And we certainly don't need potatoes and rice. When you tell people like that, usually at this stage, Brock, my patients are in tears.
Yeah.
They're in tears when you tell them you don't need a bagel. I mean, people just, this is from the time of Jesus Christ. People are breaking bread, and now they're told they don't need the bread.
Yes.
But they really don't. You really don't need it. And then the last thing we don't need is saturated fat, the animal saturated fats. So that means burgers, fries, pizza, things fried in butter, lard, gooey cheeses, ice cream. We simply don't need it.
Yeah.
But everybody, believe me, everybody, when I give brief dietary advice, they begin to negotiate the starch. They said, what about whole wheat bread? Or they'll, what about, and they'll just go into boysenberry bread. It's like, why are we negotiating? Why not just stop eating it?
Yes.
I've never had somebody negotiate a Granny Smith apple versus a Macintosh. Never.
Correct.
People never get into an emotional negotiation over a pear or a plum.
That's so
They
true.
never do. I've never had somebody come in and say, doctor, I became obese because I can't stop eating apples.
Yeah.
It's never happened.
Yeah.
But I have people come in all day long and say, yeah, I'm obese because I can eat an entire huge package of Oreo cookies.
Yes.
Or I become obese because I can eat the whole bundt cake. Or the entire bag of extra large Cheetos.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So people get obese for a reason. It's not because they ate too much calories or celery or cucumbers. And it's a really revealing question is to ask people, say, especially an obese person, say, okay, the door is closed. When you sin in your diet, tell me what's your sin. And a lot of people say, well, I think I eat too much applesauce. It's like, come on, no. It's not, you can tell they're fibbing. You can tell they're fibbing. Like, oh, I just eat a little too much walnuts or something. It's like, come on, let's fess up. And I'll never forget one time I had this gal who worked in my office years ago. And she would always be going around the office saying, everybody, I'm eating like a bird. I'm eating like a bird. And she was enormous. I mean, when she walked down the hall, you had to step into a room. She was enormous. And then one day she said, Dr. McCullough, can I see you as a patient? And I said, okay, this is a long time ago. And I said, listen, you tell everybody in the office you eat like a bird. I said, but I just have to ask. I mean, I had to ask her. She goes, yeah, Dr. McCullough, I eat like a bird around the office, but when I get home, I can make a bundt cake and eat the whole thing.
Wow.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So when you see people who are super heavy out there, believe me, if you were to hang around with them all day long, you would see things you couldn't believe. So people are super obese for a reason. And,
Yeah.
my heart goes out to them, but most of it is inability to control food urges.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's hard. There's so many amazing foods out there, especially now. I mean, you got this, that, and the other thing. You got fast food on every corner. So it's definitely hard,
But,
but it,
but Brock, let's say somebody's listening to this is overweight and they follow Dr. McCullough and they make healthy choices, high quality sources of protein, fresh fruits and vegetables, and they get rid of the 3 S's, get rid of sugar, starch, saturated fat. They still won't lose weight
why is that?
because the body's already built up increased number of fat cells. So the body can increase the number of fat cells and the size of each fat cell by tenfold. So someone who's obese has a lot more fat cells than you and me, and each
Yes.
cell is larger. So even if they lose weight, the cells shrink a little bit, but they're there and they gain the weight right back. So when it comes to diet, it's healthy choices and portion control. So you have to make all the choices and then you have to eat very little, down to the point of hunger. You do have to be a little hungry to lose weight.
Yeah.
And most people never get there. I see some obese people and I said, when was the last time you were hungry? And they'll say 25 years ago. Like, okay. Yeah. So, I mean, that's the problem. So diet is both healthy choices and portion control. And then weight loss is about 80% diet efforts and 20% exercise.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
a lot of people say, well, I just can't exercise. I'm gaining weight. Well, no, it's your diet. And, you got to put the two together. The role of exercise is largely to maintain weight loss once it's occurred.
Yes. Yeah, that makes, I mean, you should be definitely doing both. And as human beings, we weren't designed to force feed our mouths 24/7. It's just not who we are, right?
Well, listen, nobody said we had to eat 3 square meals a day. Do you ever see squirrels make a picnic on your front lawn and eat 3 meals a day? No, they kind of eat on demand. It's a real popular thing now, and it really does work. It's what's called intermittent fasting. Have you heard about this?
Yes, I do it myself, but please
You do it,
explain.
yeah. So
Yeah.
how do you do it?
So I do, well, I don't know if I'm doing it 100% correctly, but I do 12. I would love to get to 16 hours, but I do 12 hours on, 12 hours off. But my 12 hours on aren't really on. I would say about 8 hours of them are on, but it's just I only have one meal a day, like one good size meal a day, and then just a few little things during my window.
So give me an idea. When do you start eating? What time of day?
So I start eating, and it just kind of depends on what time I go to sleep. But for sure, I normally go to bed around 10 o'clock. Wake up in the morning. My routine is I wake up in the morning. I hop in the sauna for 5 minutes, get in the cold plunge, then I do a workout, and then by anywhere from 10 to 12, I'll have like my first little snack. And then about an hour or two after that, I'll have a little bit more food, and then I tend to eat dinner. That's where I get my largest meal, and then that's about it.
Wow. I can tell you on camera, you look pretty buff. Do you mind giving your dimensions? How tall are you?
Oh, I'm not buff. So I'm 6'2", 175.
Wow. That's
Yeah, but
great.
I used to be six. So I'm 6'2". I used to be 200 pounds. And I lost 25 pounds. I used to have a beer belly. And I lost all of that, and have a 6-pack now, and maybe a 4-pack actually. But like either way, I was able to slim up and transform my entire body, through proper eating. Now, am I perfect? Absolutely not. Some days I'm really good. Some days I'm bad. I have, periods of time where I really stick to it. And then, I'm a human being. So.
Wow, I gotta tell you, you look buff. You look like you could kind of be a relief pitcher for the Dodgers. Just,
Thank you.
just taking a look at you. Well, let me tell you, I graduated from high school. I weighed 140 pounds. I'm just 5'8", so I'm not as tall as you are. And I want to say by age 32, 33, 206.
There we
Had
go.
the old pot belly, was married, didn't like myself, and I really had to transform my body. It took 8 years, and I got down to age 40, 42. I weighed 136 pounds, and I ran my first marathon.
There we go.
And I ended up racing for 8 years. I raced in the 140s, and I ran a marathon in every state in the United States.
Seriously?
Have you ever met anybody who did that? Anybody on the podcast ever do that?
No, I mean, I just did my first marathon this year, but that's incredible. Let's
Yeah,
go.
yeah. I
No,
went on a trip.
that's awesome.
Yeah, do you remember that that movie with Tom Hanks? And he
Forrest Gump?
runs. Yeah, Forrest Gump. He
Of
runs
course.
and runs, and I
Yeah.
was like Forrest Gump. I started
That's
running. I didn't stop. And you know, 1 year I ran 15 marathons in a year. I ran more than one a month because once you train up, you can just go from one to another. And so
wow.
I decided I'll run one in every state, and then I ran one in Europe and Europe, Asia, and Istanbul and Canada, and then but I just figured try to get all 7 continents was going to be too hard because I realized Antarctica was basically a commitment, and I was in a lot of running groups, and a couple of guys said, "Listen, when you do Antarctica, you got to go down to the tip of Argentina. You got to wait for weeks until the weather's just right, and they take you over there. They set up a course, and and people break their ankles over there, and they're trying to run in snowsuits and stuff. It's really hard." And I figured, you had to get on a list and wait 2 years to do it. It was just too hard, so I kind of gave up at the 7 continents part of it. But yeah, I enjoyed it. After that, my weight went from the 140s to the 150s and was stable there. And just now during COVID, I got on the scale. I've been spending so much time with all these podcasters instead of exercising, and I was over 160. So let me tell you what, after this, right now, sun's setting, I'm going to go out, bike, run, push ups, sit ups. I got a pool, going to swim. I'll turn on the lights. I'm going to swim. And I really need that exercise. My wife's out of town for a prolonged period. When she comes back, I'm going to be buff and under 160. Let me tell you what, I got on the scale. I think I saw 160.2. I said, ooh, I'm just about there.
Yes, let's go. That first off, that is incredible that you have done so many marathons, first of 50, all 50 states, and even what, you might not have done 7 continents, you did 6 continents, and that's so incredible all in itself. So kudos to you, and I know that your determination will get you back to where you want. I mean, you look great, so that's all I can say.
Well, I hit 60 years old, and
Man, you
there's
look
not
great.
that many people 60 years old who are going to go run without their shirts on outside in Texas. So,
No.
I just think it can be done. You know what I used to do, which is a lot of fun? I ran all different races, 5Ks, 10Ks, marathons. I always used to look in the results, and
Yeah.
then I would ask myself, what was the oldest person who beat me
Wow.
in the time?
Yeah.
And you'd be amazed. I've been beaten by 85-year-old men.
Yes.
And, when you go to these races, there are people who are phenoms. They are
Yes.
absolutely physical
That's
phenoms.
incredible.
And racing is fun. My workout now is interesting. I'm working on a little knee injury. By the way, if you run or you work out a lot, you're always going to have some chronic injury. It's just what it is. So I'm working on a little knee injury. It feels like a torn meniscus. I think I'm getting through it. But I will bike as hard as I possibly can. I'll jump off and I'll run. I'll run just at least around the block. And it's hard to go from biking to running because the legs, feel different. And then
Yes.
after that, I'll cool down in the pool and I'll swim. And it's not a big pool. I just swim a few, laps back and forth. I'll do 20 breaststrokes and maybe 10 of the, the crawl, and cool down. But most people listening, if they've ever done a triathlon, they will know that if you do all 3 things in a workout, there's no better feeling than that. The human body loves trisport. And that's the reason why people do triathlons. It makes you feel so good. It's incredible. My son, Sean, who's now starting his residency as an ER medicine doc up in Pittsburgh, Sean always used to race with me when I was running. And then when he was in high school, he did a couple triathlons. He was pretty good. He actually beat a lot of college kids. And then he ran all 4 years for Baylor, which was my undergraduate. And Sean was always kind of good enough to be with the team. He ran Big 12 championships, pretty solid. And then in medical school, now 2 times in his junior and senior year, he qualified for and went to the national championships in the half Ironman. And
Wow.
yeah, half Ironman. He knocked it out. St. George, Utah. We know the course really well. My wife and I go. We're the support team. And, it's interesting. Most people who do triathlons, they're either very good at biking or they're very good at swimming. But very few are great runners. They kind of get through the run at the end. And Sean's just a gifted runner. He's just built for it. And on the run, he just smokes people and just he catches so many people on the run. And so he's now on the Everyman Jack team, which is a sponsored team nationwide. They got about 80 of the top half Ironman athletes. And then he got the invitation to go pro, but he's just not going to do it because he's doing his residency right now. But he's picked the right specialty, emergency room. Because emergency room, you can do a few shifts on, and then you can go ski or go train or go in the mountains or something. You know what I mean? It's going to fit
so
his
great.
lifestyle.
Wow, that's so great. I can tell how proud you are of your son too. I can just see it in your face, and that's really, really cool. Hopefully one of these days I get to do a triathlon. I think it's an incredible thing to do, and just to even participate in these, it just changes the way that you think. And completing a
You
marathon in your
feel
life
great.
is so good.
Yeah, Brock, how old are you?
I'm 30. I was had a thing for 36.
You're 36. You can definitely do it. Sign up for just a regular sprint triathlon. It's small. It's manageable.
Yeah.
You'll get through the swim and get up on the bike and then run it at the end, or even just do a biathlon. Just do run, bike, run. That's always a lot of fun. Doing these sports, it's very interesting. As soon as you sign up for an event, you sign up.
Yeah.
Then you start training hard. Because you say, listen, I'm going to have a number on my shirt. It's going to end up on the internet, and I can't embarrass myself. So I think signing up for a race is one of the best motivators to work out harder.
Yeah. I wish more people would take their health more seriously and work out and try these different things. I mean, it's just the way that you feel inside is just, it's so incredible. It's so incredible. And then when you finish, it's just, it just feels so good. I mean, I can't even explain it. You know it because you've done it. Just those feelings that go through you. And then I don't know. It's just very meditative at the same time.
Well, you know what it is, Brock? It's actually endorphins and enkephalins. You run a marathon. When I finish a marathon, I look at my pictures time. It looks like I'm buzzed. It looks like I'm on drugs.
Yes.
Well,
yes.
in a sense, it's the body's endogenous opioid system. And it's called a runner's high.
Yes.
And a lot of times you finish, you're like, listen, it doesn't matter what's going on in the world.
No.
Nothing can go wrong right now. I feel so good.
Absolutely.
And sometimes you go in the airport and you see these runners and they've just finished the race. They lit. Yes, that's it.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
they're so, the feeling.
Yeah.
So everybody listening to this, sign up, put a number on your chest, go run a 5K, go support, your charity. There's races all over. You'll just feel good. Even a 5K race or a 10K race, you'll just feel better. If you've got little kids, take your little kids. They love to run like a little diaper dash and come to the end and get a medal. What little kid doesn't want to get a medal? Then they see their parents doing it and it's fun. and you took out a Saturday morning, and it's just racing is a good thing. I did it for a long period of time, and my son Sean, he actually raced with me. My wife, she ended up running 5 marathons herself. A lot of people know her on social media; they see her, and my daughter, who's now a lawyer out in California, she ran multiple races. There's one race where we ran. It was in mid Michigan, and it was a trail race, and the adults ran 10 miles and the kids each ran 5 miles, and my kids were maybe 10 and 12 years old. But we ran
Wow.
through trails, high grass, we had to go through water and hazards, and we got all muddy and stuff. But it was the one race that we did as a family, the only race that I remember. It's called Sleepy Hollow, and we finished and we all placed in our age group.
That's so
So we
cool.
actually all got an award. We got a beer mug each one. We got 4 Sleepy Hollow beer mugs, and it was a great family event. We felt great doing it, and it's terrific. I ran a lot of marathons, but I wasn't very good. My best time, I think, was 3:45. I used to run 3:45 to 4:15, depending on the conditions. I needed to run a 3:30 to qualify for Boston, so I never qualified for Boston. I ended up running the Cape Cod Marathon. So I was never a super competitive marathon runner. But the one thing I noticed, the more I ran them, I didn't get faster, but my recovery time was faster. I was
Yeah, I'm sure.
recovering consistently faster every time. I noticed that. And there's only one marathon that I actually placed in my age group. You know which one it was?
Which one?
North Dakota.
Wow.
Bismarck, North Dakota. Yeah, because it was a relatively small race, and I guess I just hit it that day, and
You're feeling
I got,
good.
I don't know. Yeah, I got some type of extra accolade to do that. So, racing is good. Diet and fitness is really good. The other thing that comes up all the time, Brock, and I hate to bring it up, but you look like you could be kind of a wild guy, and that's alcohol.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I'm definitely not a big drinker anymore. I was when I was younger, but not anymore. I
See,
don't like the way it makes me feel
there
the
you go.
next day.
Well, here's the thing. Alcohol is very interesting. Alcohol induces the production of HDL, high density lipoprotein cholesterol, which is reverse cholesterol transport. So the French hypothesis, the French drink a little red wine and it's got alcohol. It has other congeners like resveratrol, and the data suggests for that person who drinks 1 glass of red wine every day, there is a health benefit. The problem is most people don't drink that way. They
Of
drink
course
like
not.
6 beers on a Saturday. Listen, the Dallas bars are right over here. As soon as I go outside, you'll see the kids. And, here we are. It's a Friday night, Brock. People are, been slugging it out on podcast all day. So they want to celebrate. So the pattern isn't healthy. And there's been an analysis published now about over a decade or so ago in Lancet. They just weighed out all the risks and benefits. So the benefits of this coronary heart disease protection, the risks, which are big: high blood pressure, heart failure, atrial fibrillation, obesity. It makes you heavier. And do you know what the biggest downside of drinking alcohol is? Even a little bit?
What is it?
Sleep disturbance.
There we go.
Sleep. So even though alcohol feels like it puts you to sleep, it doesn't. You do go to sleep, but the quality of sleep is not ideal. The sleep
Absolutely.
architecture is destroyed. Sleep is an intricate architecture of REM and non-REM sleep, and there's all kinds of interfacing there. And alcohol destroys sleep architecture. Even just one drink a month will destroy sleep architecture. So a great book to recommend is called The 28-Day Alcohol Challenge. It was written by 2 British guys who like to drink beer. The Brits love to drink beer. And they chronicled all these changes with the scientific data when they stopped drinking alcohol. And it was amazing. They both lost weight, no doubt about it, because alcohol is a source of calories your body can't burn. So alcohol just simply adds to a pot belly. The one true description is beer belly. That's true. And
Facts.
it's alcohol. It's not the carbohydrates in beer. The beer has relatively little carbohydrates compared to eating pretzel. It's really the calories in the alcohol. But one of the things in the 28-day alcohol challenge they noticed is their sleep got better. Oh my gosh, they felt so much better. And once you get a good night's sleep and you lose 15 pounds, it's really hard to go back. So you have to stop drinking for 28 days straight. Just stop it completely and see how good you feel. Another big thing in my practice is atrial fibrillation. That's the most common heart rhythm, Brock. You know, it's an irregular rhythm. About 15% of people get it over time. The two leading reasons why people get AFib is obesity and alcohol. And
Wow.
let me tell you what, if you can quit drinking alcohol, wow. There's even been a randomized trial from Melbourne, Australia, where they took people and listen, half the group stopped drinking alcohol completely, half continued to drink, and the AFib rates came way down for those who quit drinking.
Wow, that's absolutely incredible. I mean, I just know for myself, alcohol. When I was younger, I would definitely party, just like a lot of us out there. But when I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, I just really started. I was like, this is not working. I don't like the way it makes me feel the next day. I don't like it. I just like nothing about it. So it's occasional now that I will drink. I mean, I just went probably 7 months without even having anything. I like to feel the best that I can because I mean, having MS, you have your good days, you have your bad days, and I want to have as many good days as I possibly can.
Well,
Uh,
it's important you mentioned it. One of the hazards of alcohol I didn't mention is neurodegenerative diseases.
yep.
So the most common neurodegenerative disease is Alzheimer's disease.
Yeah.
And there's a clear relationship with alcohol and Alzheimer's disease. Every study's shown that. And if someone has the Alzheimer gene called ApoE4, that plus alcohol just drives the phenotypic expression of Alzheimer's disease. Now, alcohol and multiple sclerosis, less clear. It's just not a lot of clarity there. I'll tell you,
Yeah.
alcohol is related to another problem, macular degeneration.
Yeah.
Tons of people have macular degeneration, and one way to completely avoid it, don't drink any alcohol.
Absolutely.
So, MS is just a different problem. No one knows why it occurs. It has what's called UBOs, or unidentified bright objects in the brain, just patches of sclerosis that don't make sense, neurologic deficits that are not connected to one another.
Yeah.
And years ago, the only thing we could do for MS was to use prednisone or intermittent steroids. Now there are probably half a dozen to 2 dozen FDA-approved drugs, and I have people on these drugs, and they're very successful. I have patients with MS. They're like you. They look no different than you and me. They're able to work and play and run, and they're perfectly fine. So I think the medicines for MS have been a game changer.
That's awesome. All right. So to just switch it up, because I know we're getting close to the end, I did want to bring up, right. There was a whole bunch going on in the past couple of years with the pandemic and COVID. And you've been a bright light for a lot of people. How did this all happen?
Well, as this conversation has basically told you, I'm someone who's been considered for a long time, a top shelf person in medicine, if not the top medical doctor in the country. You can see how I range through the data. I just have it all because I'm at the peak of my career. I've had a focused scholarship on it all the way. So
Absolutely.
in my wheelhouse, I can range through topics, probably unlike any other doctor you're going to interview. But when COVID-19 hit, my first instincts were to treat patients to relieve suffering and help them prevent hospitalization and death. I got large research grants. I jumped into action. The White House called me. I was already a prominent physician. I had already testified in Congress a few years ago. So I did everything I could, and everything was great. We came up with the McCullough protocol. We published it. We were saving lives. And then the shockaroo is when other doctors didn't help their patients. They let the virus slaughter their patients. And then medical boards and other groups started slamming doctors. Doctors were fired from their jobs because they treated COVID patients, even using high-tech drugs like monoclonal antibodies or Paxlovid. I mean, if doctors attempted to treat patients, they got slammed all over. And people are like, what in the world is going on? And then we found out why. Because in December 10th of 2020, when the vaccines came in, the government said, here's a vaccine. And before you know it, we were forced to take the vaccines.
Yep.
So when I went on Tucker Carlson in March of 2021, Tucker asked me, he goes, what's going on? I said, Tucker, the suppression of early treatment was intentional. The powers that be were trying to prepare the world to accept mass vaccination. They weren't going to allow people to get treated and get out of this thing. They wanted a needle in every arm.
Why is that? Just money, right? Is that what it is?
No, it seems to be some type of vaccine ideology. There had been incredible preparation for this for years. Scenario planning and pre-planning events. There's going to be a pandemic. There's going to be a pandemic. We're going to have a life-saving vaccine. I mean, this was planned for the longest time. It's just, and when it happened, there was just, no, we're not going to let anybody get treated. We're going to save them with the vaccine. And I was saying, wait a minute, the vaccine's not here yet. It's too late. People are dying. We've got to save people now. And it went on all over the world, by the way.
Yeah, we weren't the only ones. It's absolutely incredible because I when I got COVID, I had the kitchen sink, if you will, thrown at me, monoclonal antibodies, Z-Pack, all these different things, and I went from not feeling the greatest, that's for sure. Within 24 hours, I was probably 90%, right? And within 36 hours, I was working out again.
Yeah, you see, that's the thing, is catching it early and breaking that spiral. And the McCullough protocol did feature the monoclonal antibodies. We used virucidal nasal sprays and washes. That came in later. Hydroxychloroquine, ivermectin, Paxlovid, overseas favipiravir, doxycycline, azithromycin. So people say, oh, you're pushing hydroxychloroquine. I said, no, I'm not. You give me any
Of course.
formulary, I will find a way to treat patients. The only patients who are being hospitalized or died are those who got nothing.
Yeah.
And these poor senior citizens, these people 75 with heart failure and diabetes, they got COVID. Their family members couldn't go over. Their doctor said, no, there's no treatment. They didn't get a milligram of treatment. They sat there every day and got worse and worse and worse and worse. And then they hit the panic button. They went into the hospital. And then you know what happened there. Some of them got put on the ventilator.
Yep.
And then once they got on the ventilator, it was curtains. The initial ventilator mortality rate was about 90%. Even contemporary ventilator mortality rate, paper in JAMA from Johns Hopkins, 40%. That is sky high. Do you know in cardiology, the most risky heart attack we deal with, called the STEMI, ST segment elevation MI, the mortality rate's 2%. 2. So let me tell you, 40% ventilator rate. I mean, it's obvious it's too late. You know what we learned is the ventilator is not needed at all. We could actually, the oxygen saturation could go low at home. And as long as the person could, and we eased them through it. 2 papers, one by Hazen, and I'm a co-author, one by Jackie Stone in Zimbabwe, showed that, the ventilator was irrelevant. We should have just let the oxygen levels go low and still treat them.
Yeah. What is it about the ventilator that caused so many issues?
Part of it was just the fact that once the ventilator tube is in, patients are paralyzed and sedated. They can't clear their secretions. There was a paper from Northwestern showing a lot of times a bacterial secondary infection set in. I had a couple of my patients hospitalized, and as soon as they went on the ventilator, the lungs collapsed. It popped. They were hyperventilating, so there was barotrauma. The ventilator didn't save patients. And I remember early on, former President Trump, oh, we're going to get ventilators and GM's going to put people on ventilators. I was saying, no, the ventilator is not going to save patients. They need drugs. They need drug treatment early.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you spoke up, right, did you think that you were going to get 1/10 of the backlash that you did?
No, as I moved into the first set of historic U.S. Senate hearings, I was the lead witness. November 19, 2020, the whole hospital took half a day off. People cheered. The CEO sent me congratulatory emails. It was like, I was going to save America. And then 3 months later, vaccines came out. I got called into a room and said, listen, you're fired. You're gone. So it was about the vaccines. There's no doubt about it.
What did that feel like going through that entire situation? You put your life's work into all of this, and then they just throw you to the curb.
It feels enormously unfair, but one could see the writing on the wall. I wasn't the only one. Anybody who was advocating for treatment was getting incredibly slammed. I mean, America knew I was a frequent contributor on Fox News, Newsmax, ABC, all the stations, and other commentators. Harvey Risch at Yale, he's just a senior, very senior. 25 faculty members wrote can have him lose his tenure and destroy him.
Seriously.
Ray Askewy, who was ahead of me on Fox News as the cardiologist, he subsequently died, sadly. Young guy, younger than me. Ray was told by Johns Hopkins Sibley Hospital, under no conditions can you go on Fox News and say COVID can be treated. They literally, who said they could treat COVID, was threatened, coerced, received pressure, and then professional reprisal. All of them. Because early treatment, no matter how safe and how meritorious, it got in the way of the mass vaccination campaign.
Where do you think you got the most backlash from all of it? Like, what point in time during the whole process?
I think it's pretty hot and heavy right now. I've got the American Board of Internal Medicine is trying to strip me of my residency and fellowship. That's 6 years of training. I have a perfect board certification score record, 4 board tests in internal medicine, 3 in cardiology. And, I'm fighting for my life. I spent most of today doing an appeal letter, trying to get them to drop it. They want to take me all the way and convict me of COVID misinformation, and then strip everything away from me. I won't be able to contract with insurance companies. I won't be able to hold hospital privileges, never have an academic job again, probably won't be able to get malpractice insurance. I mean, it's pretty involved having my entire career dismantled because I treated COVID patients. I published the first protocol in a very high level journal, American Journal of Medicine. I showed that it worked, and I led America out of this crisis, and that's what I'm getting for it.
I'm so sorry that you're going through all this. There have been, right or wrong, many doctors out there that have done things that are absolutely insane, and they're not being put through anything like this. Anything like this. And for you to have to deal with this is absolutely absurd. But what I do respect is that you're not backing down. You're sticking to your guns. You're sticking to who you are. Sorry, go for it.
Do you know that one of the physician email services, I think it was Medscape, they had the top 10 worst doctors in America. They come out with some poll at the end of the year. And they sent it out to every doctor in America, 1 million doctors. Guess who was in the top 10? I think it was for 2020. Me. I was in the top, I think 2021. I was in the top 10. Everybody ahead of me was wearing an orange jumpsuit. They were in prison. They shot people. They raped people. And there I was. There was just me. And what did I do? Well, because I treated COVID patients and I tried to, it was just ridiculous.
It's absolutely absurd. It's just a one-sided way of thinking, and anything going against that, they're willing to just throw everything at them. And it's just not fair, man. It's just not fair. What's the future looking like with all of this? What do you think?
Well, hopefully I'll prevail with the American Board of Internal Medicine. I've been fired now from 2 jobs. I've moved into independent practice. I've disenrolled from insurances. I've started a leading Substack, Courageous Discourse, one of the hottest medical Substacks. I've had a podcast now for well over 2 years, America Out Loud Talk Radio, McCullough Report, very popular across the world. Published a 5-star Amazon book, Courage to Face COVID-19. And I got the top doctor account on Twitter. If any doctor sees patients, I'm number 1. When I was kicked off Twitter for just 2 months last year, I was trending number 1 on Twitter. They made a hashtag, Dr. McCullough, trending number 1 ahead of the World Cup. And so, America and the world wants me on Twitter. They want my analyses. They know I've been fair, unbiased. They know I can quote the literature. They know that treating patients early, whether or not they took the vaccine, was the right approach.
Of course.
Everybody knows that. And now what's come to bear is people know the vaccines are not safe and they're not effective.
Yeah.
So
I
in the
know.
end, I've been fully vindicated. The question is, will these medical societies and these ministries of truth and these censorship organizations that have been so cruel and so heartless, will they ever capitulate? Will they ever say they're sorry?
Yeah, I don't understand why after all this time they know everything about the vaccine and they're still continuing to try to throw the book at you. It makes no sense whatsoever. Like in this world, like it is okay to be wrong. It is not okay to treat people like crap, but it's okay to be wrong. And if you're wrong, say you're wrong and let's just move forward. Like, but they're not
Yeah.
willing to do that, and they're not willing to move 1 inch at all with you. And I truly do hope that you prevail and continue this amazing work that you are doing, Doctor. I really do appreciate everything from the bottom of my heart that you are doing.
Well, you're such a good guy. As we wrap up, let me give you a
Yeah,
couple websites where you can follow me. So go to
absolutely.
couragetofacecovid.com, pick up a copy of my best-selling. By the way, it's the best book in all the COVID era. It's written by best-selling true crime author John Leake. None of the other books are written by true best-selling authors, so that doctors can't really write gripping narratives. John Leake has done it. He's terrific. He's considered the world's greatest historian. A great partnership that I've had over the last 3 years. My Substack, Courageous Discourse. We have videos, graphical abstracts, all the data cited, red hot. It's republished by Epoch Times, Trial Site News, Life Site. Probably the best medical Substack out there. My podcast, America Out Loud Talk Radio, McCullough Report. I have all kinds of people on. I've got a music section that Eric Clapton helped me get started. I interview all kinds of interesting people all over the world. You know, it's an international problem, and I love talking to people from all over the world. And so, you know, I want to find out what's going on in different places, and people tune in. On the America Out Loud platform, by the way, is terrific. It's unassailable. Will not tolerate censorship. Zero censorship on America Out Loud. They got about 24 shows, like Voice of a Nation, and there's just so many great people on America Out Loud. So anybody who's walking around the neighborhood tonight and want to, you know, take a listen, download the America Out Loud app and tune in. You one of 24 shows, listen to McCullough Report, and you know, you just it's just it is the time, Brad, for independent media. That's the reason why podcasters like you and Joe Rogan and Tommy Knightley and all the top podcasters, that's the reason why you're doing so well. People are not tuning into cable TV. They're
Yeah.
not. Also, go to my website, petermcculloughmd.com. That'll give you a McCullough protocol, all the latest updates. And, you know, in summary, I've done everything I can as a top doctor. I don't regret a single thing that I've done. I had to take care of my patients. I had to take care of my family. I was not going to let the virus slaughter people in my circles. I am ashamed and shocked that my medical colleagues allowed that to happen. And then I'm even more disgusted with doctors who have pushed these experimental genetic vaccines that have caused, we believe, listen to this, under oath, Josh Sterling, who's an actuary under oath in this Texas testimony, the U.S. Senate testimony. Sterling thinks 600,000 Americans have died of the vaccine. It's worse than the Civil War. 600,000. None of the presidents are apologizing. No one's saying they're sorry. FDA, CDC, NIH. The CDC is still saying to take these. Everyone knows they cause heart damage and blood clots. And someone like you with MS, they would have just ravaged you. You could have been in a wheelchair with one of these things. So listen, I got to tell you what. I'm bold. I'm relentless. I'm bringing people the truth. And I am not going to stop. I will prevail. I'm bigger and stronger than the other side. They know it. And thanks to you and so many great people out there in the independent media, our message will be heard. I'm Dr. Peter McCullough. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, doctor. Have a wonderful, wonderful night, and just keep on going, man. I really appreciate you.
All right.
Thank
Be
you,
good.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Absolutely.